You first, when you take a look at both of these QBs, who had the most impressive start so far in the preseason?
Well, to me, it was Shedeur. I didn't see any interceptions when he was out there. Didn't see anything like that. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't think Dillon Gabriel did a bad job. I was impressed with the brother, but I'm going to go with Shedeur. You know, the pressure was on him. The spotlight was on him.
Stephen A. Smith didn't just call out Dillon Gabriel. He held him accountable and made him rethink his comments. The moment Dillon Gabriel spoke and went after Shedeur Sanders, it wasn't a minor slip. He crossed the line and stepped directly into Stephen A. Smith's wheelhouse. And Smith answered with a clear, direct response that left no room for misinterpretation.
The comparisons were emanating from the media more so than anybody else. And that's what I think, that's exactly who I think he was directing his comments towards. Having said that, Dillon Gabriel, respectfully, it was stupid. A very dumb comment to make. First of all, let me tell you something right now. In every walk of life, far beyond the parameters of a football field.
This wasn't casual sports commentary, it was a decisive critique. Dillon Gabriel's comments were taken apart by Stephen A. Smith with clear, direct points. Gabriel, a quarterback with solid stats but limited top-level achievements, chose to take a public shot at Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur, who has handled sustained media scrutiny and on-field expectations, became the target of an unnecessary criticism. Smith responded by challenging Gabriel's standing to make that claim, and by defending Sanders on the facts. The outcome was clear. Gabriel overreached, and Sanders didn't deserve the hit.
Dan Orlovsky would sit up here in comparison to Shedeur Sanders, who did no such thing, and say, hey, thought he looked better. I got to give him the edge here. I thought it wasn't bad. A pick six and a fumble, and we can get over fumbles. Have you heard anybody say that? I know it's possible. Have you ever heard anybody say, we get over?
Stephen A. Smith responded immediately. As soon as Dillon Gabriel made his comments about Shedeur Sanders, Smith delivered a clear, point-by-point critique that drew national attention across the NCAA media cycle. Dillon Gabriel has a reputation as a good quarterback, not a dominant one. He can post strong numbers against opponents like Tulsa, but his performance has been inconsistent when the stakes and competition rise to playoff level.
Well, those who produce get treated differently than those who don't. What he said echoes the mentality of all of America practically, and most certainly the world, as we see things being globalized more and more every day. It was a stupid, idiotic, immature comment, because clearly you were feeling the heat because a lot of people was talking about how Shedeur should be QB.
Dillon Gabriel is a capable quarterback, but not a standout. Even so, he chose to talk down to Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback who has navigated constant scrutiny and pressure and still represents the future of a program that was struggling before he arrived. The comparison was weak. The criticism was unnecessary. Stephen A. Smith recognized that and dismantled Gabriel's argument with a clear, direct response.
How the Browns react to this, how the locker room reacts to this, how Shedeur reacts to this, because it was a clear shot at Shedeur. But let's say Dillon Gabriel's talking about the media. How could you be a brand new quarterback in the NFL and the first time you get behind a mic after your first game, you throw the media under the bus? That's arrogance.
Stephen A. Smith excels in moments like this. When Dillon Gabriel made his remarks about Shedeur Sanders, Smith responded with a focused, direct critique. He questioned Gabriel's standing to make that claim, noting that Gabriel has transferred between programs and has not been a Heisman finalist. Without theatrics, Smith laid out why Gabriel's resume doesn't justify taking public shots at Sanders. Smith's point was clear. Targeting Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback central to his program's future and consistently under intense scrutiny, was misplaced. Gabriel's criticism lacked the substance to support it, and Smith methodically showed why.
Content today on his 42nd I want you to be meaner. Birthday. That's number one. Number two, after the game, the Browns head coach Kevin Stefanski said there was a mix-up in the routes and that players were in the area that they shouldn't have been.
Look at Stephen A's face. Look at Stephen A's face. Look at
Stephen A.
Oh my Lord.
The strength of Stephen A. Smith's response was that he didn't just address Gabriel's remarks. He challenged the image around him. Dillon Gabriel often presents himself as an overlooked contender ready to surprise. But the reality is that his profile hasn't commanded broad attention. It's a clear reminder that not every opinion carries equal weight. In defending Shedeur Sanders, Stephen A. was direct and precise. Shedeur isn't just a quarterback. He is Deion Sanders' son, which subjects him to scrutiny far beyond anything Gabriel has faced. Even under that pressure, Shedeur has maintained his composure, shown confidence, and delivered in key moments that helped revive a program many had written off.
Stupidity, all of it. I thought it was a clear shot at Shedeur due to the fact that his Oregon coach threw a shot at Coach Prime and Shedeur during their meeting at Colorado last year. But you know what? The cream rises to the top. Let's see what happens this week. I see a lot of the media talking about they think it was about the media and not about Shedeur. And I think that's a chess move.
For Dillon Gabriel to take shots at Shedeur Sanders was a miscalculation. Stephen A. Smith made the mismatch clear. Gabriel's attempt to shame Sanders was unnecessary and counterproductive. You don't target Deion Sanders' son when Deion has turned Colorado into primetime television. It underscored that Dillon Gabriel has often played with a chip on his shoulder because the spotlight hasn't followed him. He has been around long enough to compile numbers but not to earn broad respect. That's why going after Shedeur was misguided. Sanders, despite ups and downs, drives headlines. Gabriel's most notable headlines have been his transfers. Stephen A. Smith pressed that point without hesitation, challenging Gabriel's standing and leaving his argument looking like a forced throw that turns into a pick six.
You know what? Still needs to thank me a little bit more for that restaurant I treated him and his family to, because it was big time, and stop embarrassing me by going places and trying to use coupons. That's how pathetic he is. The point is that a pick six and a fumble is usually considered a bad day.
Stephen A. Smith didn't need to raise his voice to make the point. He presented Dillon Gabriel as a player whose talk outpaces his resume and defended Shedeur Sanders with clear comparisons. That's why he called Gabriel out so directly. The comparison wasn't just unfair, it was forced. Now look at Gabriel's record. The numbers are solid and he can win against average defenses, but the resume lacks defining markers. There's no sustained Heisman contention, no late season surge that reshaped the national picture, and no postseason moment that cements a legacy. The track record reflects steady production, not top-tier impact. That's the gap Smith underscored. Gabriel's criticism of Shedeur Sanders wasn't supported by what he has accomplished, while Sanders continues to carry a program under constant scrutiny.
Let's see some of them step up and make some plays out there.
Ain't no way.
Gabriel
Ain't no way. He's not built like that. No way.
And this one is picked off and going back the other way.
Oh my God, why did he stop playing?
Now it's a foot race. And that is that.
They told me bust out my AP, perfect timing. H-shot, we about to get legendary. Shedeur start the next game, baby. Shout out Dillon though, you know what I'm saying? Bro, I love you, my heart. What am I bigger than cheese, bro? You know what I'm saying? But Shedeur got it.
Shedeur Sanders is a national brand who draws viewers for both performance and result. Dillon Gabriel's attempt to diminish him read as resentment. And Stephen A. Smith called out the insecurity and lack of awareness directly. Colorado under Deion Sanders is prime time, and Shedeur sits at the center of that spotlight. If Gabriel expected the sports world to agree while he took a shot at Shedeur, he misread the moment. Smith dismantled the argument and questioned the credibility behind it. Gabriel will move on. He'll keep playing, give interviews, and have fans, but this exchange will trail his media profile as a reminder of a misstep. It's a clear example of a resume that doesn't justify taking public aim at a quarterback carrying that level of scrutiny and responsibility.
For the Cleveland Browns preseason game today is that the way that some white folks watched Shedeur Sanders last week is the way that some black folks were watching Dillon Gabriel today. And it's not Dillon Gabriel for Dillon Gabriel's sake. Most folks don't have a problem with Dillon Gabriel. It's what he represents, which is the disrespect of a black person for no other apparent reason than they are a confident black person.
Dillon Gabriel thought he was aiming up. Instead, he was placed back among quarterbacks who are good but not great. Stephen A. Smith made the central point. Dillon Gabriel doesn't shape the conversation. Sports are about narrative as much as numbers, and Gabriel's story doesn't move the culture, while Shedeur Sanders does. Smith highlighted that contrast clearly. By the end, Gabriel's credibility had taken a measurable hit. The critique was decisive and sent a broader message to any player considering public shots at Shedeur Sanders. If you step into that debate, you will be held to a higher standard and your resume will be tested. Dillon Gabriel learned that the hard way.
when he led college football in completion percentage and he threw almost 40 touchdowns for over 4,000 yards, how tall was he? Because they make it seem like he shrunk all of a sudden, RC. Oh, how lively was his arm? Because all I know is somebody did that. Somebody threw for over 4,000 yards, somebody threw for almost 40 touchdowns, and somebody led college football in completion percentage. Now, I'm trying to figure out, what I try to figure out all the time, Mel, is how a guy that hadn't played football in almost 5 months.
Shannon Sharpe has publicly defended Shedeur Sanders and criticized those questioning him. Sanders has earned higher recognition and some fans are responding negatively. Although there's debate about whether he belongs on a second team list, Sharpe maintains that Sanders' career is clearly ascending. Reactions on social media are mixed. Some users are angry, others are surprised, and a few say they anticipated this result. The conversation remains active. When reports confirmed that Shedeur Sanders had been elevated from second team to near top tier status, Shannon Sharpe issued an emphatic response. He delivered a detailed rebuttal to critics, underscoring why Sanders deserved the promotion and directly challenging those who doubted the decision.
I don't think that he was underprepared during these meetings. I don't believe any of these stories that he showed up arrogant and that he was bombing his interviews. I mean, you watch the film, he's on time, he's on point. You watch his interviews, he answers like a 10-year NFL veteran. Like, he's clearly dominating OTAs. It's every single day there's a new report of how well he's doing for the Browns in OTAs. And I mean, you can say what you want, it's just OTAs. Okay, if that's your new narrative, then he's doing exactly what he needs to be doing. He's on point, he's on time, he's getting the respect of his teammates, and he's making plays. So we're gonna see years down the line, something's gonna come out that I don't know what exactly it was, but something will come out.
Critics have been waiting for an opportunity to dismiss Sanders. They labeled him overrated, accused him of benefiting from nepotism, and claimed his profile came only from his last name and polished image. Within their own echo chamber, they cited every game in which he fell short of huge passing numbers as validation of their doubts. Since Sanders has begun receiving formal recognition, criticism has escalated. A wave of self-appointed analysts is dissecting his throwing mechanics and team role, and many online commentators now argue that his promotion reflects deeper problems within the sport. Shannon Sharpe rejected each criticism directed at Shedeur Sanders. During the broadcast, he turned a routine segment into a detailed examination, acting as presenter, interrogator, and fact-checker. Sharpe walked viewers through game film, season statistics, and scouting reports to show why Sanders merited his recent promotion. Whenever a panelist claimed Sanders had not earned the role, Sharpe countered with completion percentages, efficiency ratings under pressure, and documented late-game drives that changed outcomes. He stressed that the backlash was driven less by on-field evidence and more by reluctance to revise earlier opinions. Sharpe argued that critics were upset not because Sanders lacked qualifications, but because his progress contradicted their initial narrative. By the end of the discussion, Sharpe had moved past simple defense and reframed Sanders as a clear example of performance-based advancement, demonstrating that early predictions can be wrong.
Never heard of no Dylan Gabriel or Tyler Shock. What the hell is that? So how is Shedeur Sanders going behind them? I'll tell you how. Collusion. 4 different times they passed on him. How the hell does that happen? 4 rounds. It doesn't happen to a quarterback. We've never seen anything like this before. Shedeur Sanders with the watch. Shedeur Sanders with his bravado. Shedeur Sanders with this supposed arrogance or whatever.
Shedeur Sanders' advancement did not happen by chance. While detractors questioned his resume online, he continued to prepare, attend every practice, and deliver accurate throws under pressure. The contrast between his output and the complaints directed at him has been stark. Some critics even argued the selection committee was, quote, biased toward performance, as if rewarding strong play were improper. Rumors quickly followed. Certain commentators speculated that a public relations push from the Sanders family must have influenced voters, suggesting everything from coordinated media strategies to alleged favors for coaches. None of these theories addresses the basic point. Sanders earned his promotion through consistent production, poise in the pocket, precise ball placement, and efficient decision-making. Shannon Sharpe highlighted these facts during his response. He noted that Sanders' performance metrics justify the recognition and emphasize that resistance to the move stems more from prior prejudice than from substantive evaluation. For Sharpe, the goal was clear: present the data, challenge unfounded claims, and correct the narrative. The discussion, therefore, became a broader statement about acknowledging merit and abandoning outdated assumptions.
Colin Cowherd defend college basketball coaches who have gotten a DUI, come to their defense and say they didn't need to be fired, that they deserve a second chance. But Shedeur Sanders drives 40 miles over the speed limit, gets a one-on-one ticket, and Colin Cowherd comes on his show today and says he's out on Shedeur Sanders. He's seen enough. He can't support him anymore. He can't be in the Shedeur Sanders camp. because of their speeding ticket.
Shannon Sharp addressed commentators who portray constant doubt as expertise. Those who discount strong performances with "we'll see" but declare bust after a single mistake. He noted their belief that progress only counts if an athlete visibly struggles. Sharp's response was methodical rather than emotional. He presented evidence, cited statistics, and calmly refuted each claim. Following his remarks, several critics began revising or deleting earlier posts, recasting themselves as longtime supporters of Shedeur Sanders despite having questioned him for months. Sharp insists on accountability, naming specific individuals and dates while requesting public acknowledgement of prior errors. He argues that analysts cannot spend months undermining a player's potential and then quietly adopt a supportive stance once the athlete succeeds.
These are serious, big-time, top-of-the-line playmakers that they have. If you can go 45-42 in the fourth quarter because your quarterback set the school record with 510 yards passing. He was flawless. Shedeur is big time. I didn't know for sure, will it translate to the next level of competition? Yes, it might translate to the next level of competition as he can play.
Critics who once claimed Shedeur Sanders was unprepared now hesitate to acknowledge their mistake. They resist retracting earlier comments and struggle to accept that an athlete can succeed without their approval. Sanders continues to share practice clips and game highlights without engaging the debate, while Shannon Sharp documents every dismissive remark, ready to revisit them on national television. The disapproval did not slow Sanders. It underscored his progress and exposed the gap between perception and performance. As a result, the conversation has shifted. Analysts who doubted him now describe him as undervalued and publish detailed evaluations of his mechanics and game management, suggesting long-standing familiarity with his career. In a matter of weeks, critics have recast themselves as advocates, demonstrating how quickly opinion can change when consistent results leave little room for doubt. Shannon Sharp signaled that his commentary is not over. He considers Sanders' advancement a positive outcome for every athlete who has been overlooked or criticized for having confidence. Sharp stressed that analysts do not have the authority to determine who deserves recognition based on personal preference. The reaction to Sanders' promotion, he argued, revealed how quickly opinions can shift once results are undeniable. Sharp pointed out that many vocal critics became quiet when confronted with objective performance data. This exchange, Sharp insisted, reached beyond defending a single quarterback. It challenged the practice of dismissing achievements that do not fit familiar narratives. He reminded viewers that success does not require external approval and that consistent talent will surface despite online commentary intended to minimize it. While critics reconsider their positions, Sharp remains steady, assigning credit to the athlete and allowing the scoreboard to confirm the argument. In his view, the statistics speak clearly enough. Sharp also emphasized that the intensity of the backlash must be placed in context. College football is a volatile environment where unexpected outcomes are common. Therefore, declaring failure based on incomplete evidence only weakens the credibility of sports analysis. The discussion underscored the need for measured evaluation rather than reactive judgment.
Zach Jackson and him and everybody else that we talked to have said that Shedeur looks good. He looks really good.
Yes.
He looks better. And we got Zach that say Dillon Gabriel ain't even an NFL quarterback.
True.
So how is it that this man can't get a rep with the ones, but that non-NFL quarterback can?
We all
what
agree
sense
with that.
does that make?
Some observers now claim that recognizing Shedeur Sanders' strong performance undermines football's traditional standards, even though they previously argued he received coverage only because of his father. Faced with Sanders' current statistics, those critics are searching for explanations that fit their earlier narrative. The data have always been clear. Their earlier objections ignored that fact. Shannon Sharp is openly highlighting this reversal, comparing past negative remarks with Sanders' recent 400-yard games to demonstrate the gap between criticism and evidence. Sharp did not force these commentators to backtrack. He simply displayed their earlier claims alongside Sanders' results, allowing the contrast to speak for itself.
So the Shedeur Sanders, I want to talk about this. So here's a prime example. Shedeur Sanders, they had 3-day mini camp for the Cleveland Browns. And now Jimmy Haslam actually has some money. The Bengals owners and the Rooneys are near the bottom of the league in net worth. But what the Browns have is what I would call the Buffalo Bills used to have this years ago, pre-Josh Allen.
What are Browns veterans saying about Shedeur Sanders behind closed doors? According to internal discussions, the feedback goes beyond casual praise. Several veterans describe his performance as franchise level. Private locker room conversations compare his command of the offense to established starters. And one senior assistant reportedly called him Sunday ready after a single walkthrough. The consensus is that front office staff and coaches have taken serious serious notice. Inside the Browns facility, informal conversations circulate among players and coaches. These remarks carry significant weight in personnel evaluations and often influence practice rotations. When veterans speak this strongly, the message typically reaches decision makers quickly, especially during roster planning. In short, the internal perception of Sanders is already affecting how the staff views the current quarterback depth chart.
Browns vets kind of weigh in on Shedeur Sanders and how he's been since he arrived in Cleveland, in Pound Town. And I think it's very, very important that we discuss it, because it'd be really easy for these vets to, this wasn't like a on-the-record interviews. This is just kind of back channels into what the vets are saying, the rumors, but the sources telling us. And we have a couple quotes, but Shedeur Sanders, Cleveland Browns, it seems like it's going well. And it's almost like you don't want to talk about it.
At the center of the growing internal buzz is Shedeur Sanders, the rookie who entered Berea with late-round expectations but is being discussed privately as a potential long-term starter. This is not a routine camp tale about an extra arm taking practice snaps. Sanders has seasoned teammates, players with playoff mileage, quietly reassessing his ceiling. Observers who overlook these conversations risk missing one of Cleveland's most deliberate personnel moves in years. Sanders is not on the roster because of his surname. The Browns reviewed their quarterback depth, weighed costs, and chose a controlled, development-oriented option they believe can stabilize the position. His presence is already changing practice dynamics. Veterans notice his pocket awareness, adjust routes to his timing, and acknowledge that he processes coverage at an advanced level for a first-year player. Leadership patterns in the huddle feel different. Sanders delivers with precision and composure that challenge defenders to reevaluate their calls. The strategic upside is clear. A 4-year rookie contract offers cap flexibility while other franchises cycle through expensive stopgaps. Coaches and front office staff view Sanders as a calculated investment, not a publicity experiment. Outside chatter still focuses on Joe Flacco's age or Kenny Pickett's development. Inside the facility, however, veterans pause film sessions to dissect Sanders' ball placement and progression speed. Position coaches highlight clips where he works through reads decisively and delivers on time, traits rarely attributed to rookies. Sanders' confidence is measured rather than theatrical. He moves as though the NFL tempo is familiar, and that calm spreads across the roster. Experienced defenders are rechecking the depth chart and asking if the quarterback competition is tighter than publicly acknowledged.
Great kid, and whether it's a following that he's earned, I mean, that's something that he's done a great job of interacting with fans. And but he is a great kid. You guys will get to know him more. He's working like crazy, just like all the guys. He's another young man. These rookies, my office is downstairs. As they got to walk by my office as they come in. They come in early. And Shedeur, just like all those guys, he's in there early. He's getting his work done.
He has not yet secured the starting job. Evaluations so far come only from brief practice periods, no comeback drives, no national headlines, just steady execution in shorts and helmets. In a league that celebrates splashy debuts, Shedeur Sanders is earning trust rep by rep. Veterans typically withhold judgment until late in camp, yet several are already studying his footwork and timing, which suggests genuine respect. Inside the building, coaches sense that the Browns may have finally found a stabilizing presence at quarterback. Cleveland's recent history underscores why this matters. The team has started 9 quarterbacks over the past 2 seasons, an indicator of instability rather than depth. Sanders arrives with composure, arm strength, and a well-known surname, so any sign of readiness is magnified. Financial context also plays a role. The Browns are allocating a significant portion of the salary cap to Deshaun Watson, whose performance has not matched that investment. To manage costs, the front office signed 4 additional quarterbacks on low-impact contracts. Together, they account for far less than Watson's annual cap figure. If Sanders continues on his current trajectory, that structure could give Cleveland both competitive clarity and much-needed financial flexibility.
He's the only person who's come out and say, hey, man, this dude look kind of good, man. Let me tell you what I heard. A lot of people reaching out to players in the locker room and stuff. To me, I think this is it's a red herring. Like, I'm supposed to suspend myself to disbelief that he was going to look bad. I've never expected him to look bad to start with. The 5th round quarterback stuff, that's involving perceptions, pre-draft analysis, and other teams
Cleveland's veterans have endured every kind of quarterback turmoil, poor reads, major injuries, shaken confidence, and sideline disputes. When a young quarterback like Shedeur Sanders steps in and appears composed rather than overwhelmed, people notice. The attention comes not just from coaches and reporters, but from the linemen and defensive leaders who have watched previous backups struggle. They are not exchanging doubts, they are sharing nods of approval. Sanders demonstrates instinctive pocket awareness, reliable accuracy, and steady poise, qualities that quickly circulate through team conversations. After years of instability under center, the Browns need someone who can remain calm and effective deep into the season. Although expectations have fallen over time, genuine interest is growing. Praise is coming from teammates who rarely commend anyone unless his performance demands it. They say training camp decides depth charts, but Shedeur Sanders began fighting for his job long before he will step inside the Browns facility. While most first-year players squeezed in one last vacation, he slipped onto a private field in Texas, strapped on Cleveland's helmet and shoulder pads, pulled a fresh number 2 jersey over his chest, and started rifling timing routes as if it were the opening drive of week 1. No cameras, no hype track, no product placement, just sweat, cadence, and ball placement. A rookie does not rehearse in full game gear unless he already envisions himself commanding the huddle. Plenty of observers shrug that clip off. They insist the 5th rounder, quote, isn't ready, cling to depth chart conventions, or whisper that the name across his shoulders did most of the talking on draft day. Maybe it is the Dion connection, maybe it is a preference for prospects who blend quietly into the background, or maybe the league's gatekeepers fear the possibility that the kid is better than the quarterbacks they have spent months promoting. Whatever the motive, the countdown has started, and video rarely lies. Shedeur Sanders is not preparing to arrive. He is preparing to lead. Footage of a 22-year-old quarterback running live reps in July should dominate highlight loops, but it barely registers on national outlets. Why? It ruins the tidy narrative. The easy storyline paints Shedeur as a pampered legacy prospect banking on his father's fame. Yet the tape shows something different. A rookie drenched in afternoon heat, drilling footwork, calling protections, and imagining cover 2 rotation before the first official meeting ever takes place. Elite mental prep looks boring on social feeds. It looks devastating when the season starts. Walk into Cleveland's quarterback room and you step into politics, not simply competition. Joe Flacco, a Super Bowl MVP in decline, carries institutional trust. Kenny Pickett, rescued from Pittsburgh's reset, carries hometown intrigue. Dillon Gabriel, the 3rd-round system fit, carries draft capital the staff must justify. And then there's Shedeur, the lightning rod whose presence alone spotlights every bias in the evaluation process. Coaches frame it neatly. Rookies must wait their turn. The truth is less polite. Practice snaps are currency. Perception is elastic, and early allocations already favor Pickett and Flacco. It is the oldest playbook in the league. Lock vets into the headline roles before pads even crack. Then let repetition shape reality. Sanders refuses to cooperate. He is not a 4th-string camp arm. He has engineered game-winning drives under national scrutiny, operated against live blitz looks most prospects never face, and more than any quarterback in the room, documented his own off-season obsession. No social media rollout, no brand consultant, just pads, cleats, and an unlit practice field. If his last name were Smith, pundits would label him the sleeper of camp. Instead, politics trails every throw. Training camp rotations expose organizational intent. Beat writer Fred Greetham already reports that Pickett and Flacco will open with first-team reps when veterans report July 23rd. Gabriel grabs the developmental snaps, leaving Sanders the leftovers. That isn't performance-based, it's narrative-safe. Gabriel doesn't threaten hierarchy, Sanders bends gravity. Watch the details. Does Shedeur steal 11-on-11 snaps with the 2s? Does he run red zone installs or 2-minute drills? If he does, coaches are admitting he is forcing his way in. If he doesn't, they are postponing the inevitable. Either way, the private field reps have sharpened his timing and condensed his release. He is not hoping for an opportunity, he is prepared to seize one the instant it appears. Cleveland's joint practices amplify that tension. First come live periods against the Panthers, then sessions with the champion Eagles. Those reps belong to the starters, so Flacco and Pickett will absorb most of Carolina's disguised pressure and Philadelphia's exotic fronts. Sanders' proving ground will be the preseason opener on August 8th. Under the stadium lights, he will get entire series, real reads, pockets collapsing for real. If his command mirrors the footage from Texas, coaches will have to answer why he never saw earlier work. Reps are scarce. 10 padded practices separate veteran arrival from game 1. Even an even split, something that never happens, would hardly suffice. Instead, the staff will funnel snaps toward the comfortable choices. That strategy can bury a rookie, but it can also spark an eruption when limited opportunities turn into highlight drives. One flawless touchdown march in the second half of a preseason game, and the dog pound will chant his name. Then the staff's narrative control evaporates. Criticism of Sanders has never matched the scrutiny applied to his peers. Analysts nitpick a ball pat, a foot angle, a pump fake, Pickett's inconsistency, Flacco's diminishing velocity, Gabriel's college system crutches. Discuss politely, if at all. With Shedeur, the critiques arrive as coded doubts. Does he rely on the family brand? Is he coachable? Can he stay humble? That double standard is as old as the league's resistance to outspoken black quarterbacks. Add Deion's unapologetic persona, and each Sanders rep becomes a referendum on establishment comfort levels. Shedeur answers not with rebuttals, but with work. Work captured in silent footage more deafening than any debate show monologue. Quarterback drama masks broader roster cracks. The Browns receiver group is crowded yet unproven. The safety room failed to create turnovers a year ago. Interior defensive linemen are still rehabbing, and the offensive line must retool on the fly. Which quarterback can navigate that turbulence? Flacco's pocket mobility is limited. Pickett's confidence remains fragile. Gabriel is months away from processing NFL disguises. Sanders, forged by perpetual doubt, offers poise under chaos and meticulous preparation, a combination this franchise has lacked since, well, almost forever. Forget politics, depth chart etiquette, and recycled sound bites about developmental timelines. The only metric that counts now is who did the work. Sanders pounding through full gear scripts in late June is not vanity, it's vision. While the league sleeps, he refines his drop steps. While media speculate, he rehearses third down checks. He has already decided what he is. The organization must decide if it can recognize it in time. The preseason will provide the answer. Live bullets, real blitzes, stadium noise. When those throws leave his hand under pressure, no one will discuss ball pats or surnames. They will ask how a quarterback this prepared slipped to round 5. And if the performance matches the preparation, excuses about lack of reps will dissolve. It will be production against perception, and Shedeur Sanders has been producing where no one could see. Ready is the wrong word. He has been ready. Shedeur Sanders doesn't ask for excuses. He hasn't blamed limited reps, patched together receiver groups, or fourth-string offensive linemen struggling against Cleveland's second-team defense. He shows up, works, and demonstrates why he belongs. On day 3 of Browns training camp, for the first time since OTAs, he finally received something close to a fair opportunity. He lined up with the second unit during an 11-on-11 period and made the most of it. In 8 plays, he did what he typically does when given a chance. He executed. He went 2 for 2 on a quick series, finishing with a decisive throw to tight end Blake Whiteheart that immediately caught the sideline's attention. There was no hesitation in his drop, no unsettled feet, and no panic. Just firm, accurate timing and clean operation. It raised an obvious question. What has taken so long for the Browns to evaluate him with a functional group? The story isn't only about one throw, it's about the delay before it. Sanders has been the guy for most of his football life, commanding high school programs, starring in the Southwestern Athletic Conference at Jackson State, then operating under national attention at Colorado. For the first time, he's been told to wait. He has treated that reality as part of the job rather than a setback. He has prepared like a professional since the moment he arrived, and on the 3rd day of camp in heavy heat, he let the football represent his case. While coverage focused on the veteran presence of Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco, Sanders made an impression with minimal volume. The difference with the second team was immediate. Protection held up, routes were on schedule, and progressions unfolded as designed. Within that structure, he looked like the quarterback who led efficient offenses at Jackson State and Colorado. Calm in the pocket, decisive in his reads, and accurate to tight windows. This was not simply a good practice period, it was a clear statement. He was not just operating the script, he was directing it. The timing was sharp, the reads were clean, and the seam throw to Whiteheart was a high-level anticipation throw, professional in placement and pace. The narrative around Sanders should reflect that when he is placed in a workable situation, his strengths are visible. Early work with 4th unit personnel included protection issues and unreliable spacing. With the 2nd unit, those variables stabilized, and his work looked consistent with his resume. The performance supported a straightforward conclusion. The evaluation should move forward with higher quality reps. Sanders has been explicit about his approach. He does not request special treatment. He intends to be prepared so that when an opportunity appears, he can step in without a drop-off. He has said he wants to be ready for anything and not offer explanations after the fact. That mindset fits what teammates and coaches have observed. A quarterback focused on the assignment, not the conversation around it. The conditions were demanding: relentless sun, heavy humidity, and a practice tempo that stressed decision-making. Many players fatigued as the session wore on. Sanders did not show signs of rushing reads or forcing the ball. He managed the pocket, reset his base when necessary, and continued to deliver on time. The path he has taken, HBCU starter in the SWAC, then Power 5 starter under constant attention, has prepared him for compressed evaluation windows. He has been under scrutiny for years. The heat did not change his process. He moved defenders with his eyes, anticipated breaks, and stepped into throws with balance. The crowd was not chanting his name, and there were no ovations. That was irrelevant to the task. He is focused on the locker room and the staff, and he is building credibility the same way he did at previous stops, by being reliable when the ball is snapped. Quarterbacks coach Bill Musgrave has emphasized ignoring external noise and keeping attention on install, footwork, and timing. Sanders is familiar with the dynamic. He has been followed by cameras and commentary since his early teens. He has experience living with attention and still adhering to routine. Under heat, with a narrow set of snaps and multiple decision points, he stayed composed and effective. 2 speeding citations, 91 miles per hour in Brunswick and 101 miles per hour in Strongsville, became national items. General Manager Andrew Berry characterized the decisions as not smart and stressed that it's not only about driving fast, but about the safety of others. Sanders accepted responsibility, stated that he learned from the incidents, and said he would follow the rules. The attention to those citations did not alter his daily schedule or his practice preparation. He arrived early, stayed engaged, and kept the discussion centered on work. Away from the field, he spent time at Rainbow Terrace in Cleveland after a significant apartment fire, distributing supplies and checking on families affected by the incident. There was no formal media rollout around the visit. It was an instance of direct engagement with the community without publicity attached to it. That reflects the same approach he shows inside the building. Do the work first. Sanders treats each rep as if it might be his last for the day and his only chance to show a specific element on tape. He prepares for protections, cadence variations, route adjustments, and timing with a level of detail that compresses the learning curve. When he is not under center, he studies coverages from the sideline, charts plays, and reviews video before and after practice. He writes down the next day's calls so he can anticipate checks. He has reference using virtual simulation tools to replicate snaps he does not receive physically. That is not a passive stance, it is an active attempt to reduce the distance between classroom and field. He is building relationships across the roster, not just with projected starters. He communicates with defensive backs to understand what they see and how they react to certain stems. He spends time with offensive linemen to align on cadence and protection calls. He connects with newer players away from the facility so that communication improves in practice. That is practical leadership, consistent, low visibility work that becomes obvious when the ball is snapped and the operation is smooth. 3 days into camp, a central question remains. Why hasn't he taken a first-team rep? Flacco has seen work. Pickett has seen work. Dillon Gabriel has been cycled in. Sanders has remained behind all 3 on the depth chart while producing efficient periods when provided stable support. Head coach Kevin Stefanski has not publicly detailed the plan for distributing first-team snaps among the quarterbacks. When asked, Sanders answered that it is not his place to comment on rotation decisions. That response aligns with his day-to-day conduct, respectful, professional, and centered on the next assignment. The staff is managing a room with a Super Bowl MVP, a former first-round pick, multiple rookies, and a new set of combinations on the offensive line. That creates a set of decisions about exposure, pacing, and evaluation windows. Within that context, Sanders has presented a clear case for additional evaluation. He has shown he can execute the offense as designed when the variables are standard. Musgrave has a long-standing connection with the Sanders family through his time as a teammate of Deion Sanders in San Francisco. That familiarity supports direct communication. It does not guarantee anything about the depth chart, but it does help streamline teaching, feedback, and expectation setting. Inside the defensive back room, veterans such as Denzel Ward have provided perspective on timing, leverage, and eye discipline that Sanders has incorporated into his preparation. He is operating without the immediate family structure that defined his college environment. Away from his brother Shiloh and his father Deion, he is managing his own housing, nutrition, recovery schedule, and all the smaller tasks that accompany an NFL routine. Those adjustments matter because they influence consistency across a long camp. He has treated those responsibilities as part of the job rather than distractions, which is reflected in a steady daily approach. What he showed on day 3 with the second unit was not a surprise to those who have tracked his prior work. It was a continuation of a profile, efficient sequencing, clear timing, and consistent ball placement when protections and routes hold up. The 8-play period was short, but it was enough to reinforce the point. He doesn't need a large sample to demonstrate baseline operation. He needs a fair sample to test ceiling and adaptability. There is also the matter of perception. Public attention concentrated on the speeding tickets and the general manager's response. Less attention fell on the preparation, the efficient period with the second team, or the community engagement at Rainbow Terrace. That imbalance is common in training camp narratives. Sanders has handled it by keeping his answers simple and his focus on football. He has not tried to redirect the conversation. He has done his work and waited for additional reps. The objective next step is straightforward. Expand the evaluation with higher unit personnel and standard opponents. That does not require a complete reshuffling of the depth chart. It requires allocating a defined sequence of first-team snaps so that timing with starting receivers and protections with starting linemen can be measured on tape. The staff can then compare operation speed, accuracy under pressure, red zone decision-making, and 2-minute mechanics against the other quarterbacks. That is the most direct way to clarify the competition. None of this dismisses the experience or track records of the veterans in the room. It emphasizes that the purpose of camp is to test assumptions with current performance. Sanders has provided enough evidence with the second unit to justify a broader look. He has shown that the pace of his feet matches the pace of his eyes, that he can hold safeties with his shoulders, and that he can drive intermediate throws without float. He has also shown discipline to take the clean completion rather than force the vertical shot when leverage dictates otherwise. Every day, he has addressed the controllable items, meetings, note-taking, install recall, cadence management, and post-practice review. He has not asked for public guarantees. He has asked for an opportunity to compete on comparable terms. The 8-play sequence with the second unit was a small but clear example of what he can do when those terms exist. The staff's communications have been measured. Stefanski has not laid out a schedule for first-team rotations publicly. Barry addressed the speeding incidents directly and emphasized standards for decision-making off the field. Sanders accepted the criticism, adjusted his behavior, and moved forward. Those are the relevant facts. What remains is a football evaluation that can only be completed by giving him snaps with the top group and measuring the results. If that evaluation occurs and he performs at the level he showed with the second unit, the conversation will shift from potential to placement. If it does not occur, the question will persist through camp. Why not test the full picture? Sanders has built a case based on preparation, poise, and execution. He has demonstrated leadership by building relationships across the roster. He has shown maturity in handling external issues directly and moving on. He has given the staff reasons on the field and in the building to continue the process. 3 days into camp, he has answered everything within his control. He has shown growth, discipline, and consistent operation. He turned early fourth-team disarray into learning, then executed cleanly when moved to the second unit. He kept the discussion on football when outside topics threatened to dominate. He has not tried to win a press conference. He has tried to win every rep. If he continues to stack days like this, the next step is logical. Evaluate him with the starters, document the results, and let the tape determine the depth chart. Until then, he will continue to prepare, continue to compete, and continue to present the same message through his play.
I'm about to unleash about Shedeur Sanders. I just watched what happened to Shedeur Sanders in the Cleveland Browns' third and final preseason game. And I'm outraged, I'm sickened, and I'm saddened by the way Shedeur continues to be treated in the National Football League. Now by those sorry-ass Browns and sorry-ass Kevin Stefanski.
The Cleveland Browns are once again mishandling a promising quarterback. Skip Bayless criticized the organization for failing to develop Shedeur Sanders and for misusing his skill set. He argued that the team's decisions are undermining Sanders' progress and turning a major investment into a cautionary example. Bayless pointed to inconsistent usage, questionable play calling, and a lack of clear direction as key issues limiting Sanders. He said the Browns need a defined development plan and stronger support if they expect Sanders to succeed. Skip Bayless delivered a direct, critical assessment this week. After seeing Shedeur Sanders in a Browns uniform, he argued that Cleveland is mishandling the quarterback and undermining his development. Bayless said the team's approach shows poor planning and inadequate support around Sanders. He dismissed excuses about strategy and emphasized the need for better coaching, deployment, and protection. In his view, the Browns are setting themselves up for problems before the season begins unless they establish a clear plan for Sanders. Given the team's recent decisions, his reaction is understandable. Cleveland has a history of inconsistent quarterback development. Shedeur Sanders is a premium prospect, the son of a Hall of Famer, a proven college performer, and a widely recognized figure. The organization should prioritize his reps, protection, and a clear development plan, not place him behind Dillon Gabriel as if he were a secondary option.
But I'm going to answer this question by saying Shedeur Sanders. And I'm going to tell you why. I think he's being set up to fail. That's right, I'm going to say it.
Okay.
Here we are on national television, right? There's been 11 practices, if I remember correctly. He's been starting against, he's been playing against the third unit. He's fourth on the depth chart. And then suddenly you throw him into the start line, and he hasn't had any reps for the first team at all. Think about that. So you're just gonna throw him to the wolves like that, huh? I mean, you know, if he had first team snaps in practice.
Yet here we are. Cleveland has one of the most publicized prospects and is handling him like a depth piece. The broader issue is the franchise's long record of quarterback instability and inconsistent development. That history colors every move they make. When the Browns draft a quarterback, fans don't anticipate a long-term answer. They brace for another reset. Shedeur Sanders should be treated as a priority, not as an afterthought behind Dillon Gabriel.
Let's give him a chance. Let's give him a chance with the play calling. You know you have an offensive line that isn't playing that well. So what do? Why not just play the short game so he can get the ball out of his hands very fast to run a competent goddamn offense? Outside of that, Shedeur has to be better in understanding that the offensive line that you're working with right now is not adequate. Why not allow the players that are competing for a job, in this instance, Shedeur Sanders, to finish off the 2-minute drill?
When Browns fans see another quarterback selected, they brace for another setback. The franchise's recent history, from Johnny Manziel's failed stint to the rocky handling of Baker Mayfield, reflects inconsistent development and short-term decision-making. Against that backdrop, Skip Bayless's reaction to Shedeur Sanders on Cleveland's roster was blunt. He argued the team is already mishandling a premium prospect by treating him as a secondary option instead of a centerpiece for the future. Bayless's position is straightforward. Sanders is not just a name, he brings proven college production, leadership traits, and significant visibility that can strengthen both the offense and the organization's broader profile. Burying him on the depth chart behind Dillon Gabriel signals a lack of a clear development plan and wastes early momentum. Instead, Bayless contends, Cleveland should establish a defined pathway. First-team practice reps, protection and personnel tailored to his strengths, deliberate play calling that accelerates processing, and measured in-game opportunities that build confidence and execution. In his view, the Browns need alignment from the front office to the coaching staff to prioritize Sanders' growth. Continuing to treat him like a depth piece risks repeating the same cycle that has undermined previous quarterbacks. Committing to a coherent plan gives Sanders and the franchise a realistic chance to convert potential into sustained performance.
What do you think is happening in Browns camp? What do you think is going to happen there before I let you go, Lewis?
You know, I think it really does all depend on how Kevin is able to, as it relates to Shedeur, work him in enough. Well, one, Shedeur has to earn the right for Kevin and the staff to have discussions about, hey, we got to get him more reps with the ones and twos. We got to get him more reps with the ones and twos when we're going team period, not just walk through or not just 7-on-7 team.
Louis Riddick reacted sharply on air after viewing practice footage from the Cleveland Browns. The clip showed quarterback Shedeur Sanders executing a string of precise throws while the Browns head coach watched with a broad smile. Riddick questioned whether the session was focused on evaluation or celebration, arguing that visible enthusiasm from the staff could cloud objective assessment of a rookie's progress. Earlier in the segment, Riddick's tone had been measured once the Sanders highlights appeared. He criticized the perception that a routine practice was being treated like a marquee event. He stressed that coaching reactions should remain subdued until performance translates into game situations. Riddick concluded by calling calling for accountability and asking the Browns to clarify how they plan to manage expectations for Shedeur Sanders as training camp continues.
Couldn't imagine me myself saying, hey, you know what? As someone who has been at the very bottom to try and ascend to like some level of success, I could never imagine going, you know what would be really cool? I'm gonna play a joke on someone like this and make pretend that I'm a GM and I'm drafting you when actually I'm not, and then I'm gonna hang up and just giggle about it. Man, what the hell are we doing? Seriously, what are we doing when we think that that kind of crap is funny?
I don't know. Trying to get likes on TikTok.
I don't have the right words for it.
Right, Lewis, I'm gonna say this.
I don't have the right words for it.
Few situations unsettle a former front office executive faster than watching coaches celebrate a rookie quarterback before pads come on in August. In Louis Riddick's view, the Browns staff did more than acknowledge promise. They acted as though they had already secured their franchise leader. Throughout the session, Shedeur Sanders delivered 40-yard throws off his back foot, ran crisp 2-minute drills, and displayed steadiness rare for a first-year player. According to reports, each successful rep drew audible admiration from the sideline, highlighting how quickly enthusiasm has escalated. When Riddick reviewed the same practice tape and heard the glowing comments, he challenged the reaction on live television. He argued that a few controlled drills should not override the methodical scouting and development work that normally guides roster decisions. Riddick's criticism focused less on Sanders' talent than on the evaluation process. He warned that comparing a prospect to established stars or joking about renaming the stadium creates pressure before the player has taken an NFL hit, faced a disguised coverage, or logged a preseason snap. Praising potential is acceptable, he said, but anointing a savior in July risks repeating the organization's history of premature quarterback expectations. Sanders brings confidence shaped by his father's legacy and his own disciplined preparation, yet Riddick insists that progress must be confirmed over time. He urged the Browns to temper public excitement, follow a structured development plan, and reserve celebratory reactions for on-field results that matter. Regular season production under live pressure, not highlight clips from a midsummer workout.
He has to earn that. Kevin has to figure out a way to do that. So then you can reasonably assess what you have in him compared to Dillon Gabriel, compared to Kenny, compared to Joe Flacco. If you don't, then the conversation surrounding him is going to continue to be what it's been, which is, but for some people, he was overhyped all along. He's not that great of an athlete, doesn't have a big enough arm. There's a reason why he was a 5th-round pick, blah, 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 which I don't believe. I believe if he is given enough reps, earns enough reps, and then is given enough reps in meaningful situations, he can throw the ball just as good as Joe, if not better, just as good as Kenny, if not better, just as good as Dillon Gabriel.
After more than 2 decades in personnel and broadcast analysis, Louis Riddick was dismayed to see a franchise bypass basic evaluation standards after only a series of eye-catching minicamp throws. Reviewing practice footage from Cleveland, he observed Shedeur Sanders drilling 40-yard passes against uncovered receivers and running 2-minute sequences with poise. In Riddick's view, those reps, conducted without pads, contact, or a disguised rush, show arm talent but reveal little about how a rookie handles game pressure. Riddick said the Browns' reaction drifted from objective assessment to outright admiration. Multiple reports indicated coaches were sketching new concepts for Sanders during dinner and referring to dedicated Shedeur packages well before a padded practice. Even the veterans in the quarterback room showed no visible alarm, a sign that staff excitement had already reset the internal depth chart conversation. The analyst emphasized that his concern is not Sanders' skill set. He acknowledged the quarterback's arm strength, footwork, and composure, but rather how quickly the club appears willing to declare him its long-term answer. Riddick cited several past prospects who received similar midsummer acclaim only to stall once real competition began. Given Cleveland's long history of quarterback turnover, he argued the organization should focus on incremental milestones, processing post-snap reads, surviving live pass rushes, and rebounding from mistakes on Sunday afternoons. Riddick urged the Browns to temper expectations and follow a structured development plan so Shedeur Sanders can progress without undue pressure. One coach reportedly admitted he replayed Tuesday's scrimmage film so often that he lost sleep, an anecdote Riddick offered as proof that enthusiasm is already outpacing reality.
All asking now is what is going on with Shedeur Sanders, and so the floor is yours. Maybe you can make sense of this free fall with what was at one point the top-rated quarterback in this draft class.
Yeah, Jay, I think at this point in time, this really isn't a football discussion any longer. This is a personal discussion. This is about It's a fit discussion. It's whether or not teams are just comfortable with everything that comes along with Shedeur in terms of who he is as a person, all the people that are surrounding him in terms of his inner circle, and whether or not teams deem that to be something that they're comfortable with. Right or wrong, that's the only conclusion you can really come to at this point.
Louis Riddick voiced an escalating concern during the segment. Having witnessed numerous quarterback setbacks in his career, he worries another may be forming. Not because Shedeur Sanders lacks talent, but because the praise around him is growing without restraint. Sanders has simply attended practice, delivered accurate passes, led the huddle, and shown the composure expected of an NFL player. Riddick fears the Browns' reaction, treating routine drills as proof of long-term success, risks setting premature expectations. He cautioned that the organization seems ready to celebrate a franchise savior before Sanders has taken a competitive snap, noting that such early adulation has derailed promising prospects in the past and could impede Sanders' measured development.
Urban Meyer's roster history underscores the absurdity. Meyer coached Aaron Hernandez, whose off-field crimes are well documented, along with other players entangled in assaults, academic misconduct, and more. Yet Feinbaum singled out Newton, a national champion, Heisman Trophy winner, and NFL MVP, as the worst. This selective condemnation is not new. When Deion Sanders recently suggested implementing an NIL salary cap to restore competitive balance, Feinbaum dismissed the proposal and called Sanders a hypocrite rather than engage with the substance. The pattern repeats. Feinbaum routinely targets Cam Newton, Deion Sanders, Jameis Winston, Lamar Jackson, outspoken black athletes and coaches, while extending grace to figures such as Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Dabo Swinney, or Tim Tebow under similar circumstances. Newton is no longer content to remain silent while others distort his story. In response, he laid out an accurate chronology, highlighting facts the commentary networks rarely repeat. One long-standing myth is that Newton was expelled from the University of Florida. He was not. Tim Tebow held the starting job unchallenged, and Meyer had no intention of displacing his star. Like thousands of athletes each year, Newton transferred to find a place where he could play. The move was strategic, not disciplinary. He is, with 3-2-2-5-3-17 to transfer to and Moorbeck, Meyer was. Critics habitually resurrect the 2008 laptop incident to tarnish Newton's entire career. Newton has acknowledged the mistake, but its relevance is overstated. The incident did not prompt his transfer, nor did it derail his trajectory. After leaving Florida, Newton enrolled at Blinn College, a Texas JUCO powerhouse, and led the Buccaneers to a national championship while posting dominant statistics. That performance earned him the opportunity to transfer to Auburn. At Auburn, Newton produced one of the most extraordinary single seasons in collegiate history. More than 4,000 yards of total offense, 50 combined touchdowns, an SEC title, a national championship, and the Heisman Trophy. Achievement compressed into a single year under intense scrutiny. Even that landmark season is recast by Feinbaum as a cautionary tale. He claims Newton ignored head coach Gene Chizik by diving for a goal line touchdown when told to kneel, jeopardizing the game. In reality, Newton explained that the decision was a collective adjustment made in the huddle after reading the defense. While Auburn still held timeouts, the Tigers maintained control and secured the championship. Portraying that moment as reckless serves to recast Newton's success as selfishness rather than leadership.
Feinbaum's approach to Sanders reflects the same dynamic. When Sanders urged a structured NIL ceiling to protect athletes and stabilize rosters, Feinbaum immediately labeled him hypocritical. Yet when Saban or Swinney voice identical concerns, Feinbaum frames them as thoughtful guardians of the sport. The inconsistency reveals that the determining factor is not the argument but the identity of the speaker. Unapologetic black leaders who control their narratives, challenge entrenched hierarchies, and Feinbaum's commentary often functions as a check on that influence. Newton countered Feinbaum's latest attack with a concise statement. "You're lying, Paul. Please stop." Behind those words lay a broader indictment of the media machinery that weaponizes half-truths. By calling Newton the worst player Meyer coached, Feinbaum was seeding doubt among fans, front office evaluators, and future historians. Newton, now an established media presence and entrepreneur, no longer depends on traditional outlets to correct the record. He reminded audiences of three essential truths. He departed Florida on his own terms, he led Auburn with support from coaches and teammates, and he captured every major accolade available in college and professional football without conforming
conforming to prescribed expectations. An unspoken rule lingers in American sports discourse. Black athletes may excel, but must do so quietly, gratefully, and without highlighting systemic inequities. Newton broke that expectation early by celebrating with unreserved joy, answering questions candidly, and refusing to minimize his personality. For some commentators, that confidence is reinterpreted as arrogance. Feinbaum's repeated attempts to undermine Newton follow a familiar script of policing behavior rather than analyzing performance. Yet, legacy rests not in a pundit soundbite, but in tangible achievements and public memory. Newton's resume, Heisman winner, national champion, NFL MVP, speaks for itself. Millions of fans witnessed his impact on Saturdays and Sundays. Countless young quarterbacks saw someone who looked like them redefine the position's possibilities. The same is true for Sanders, whose player-first coaching philosophy and media savvy continue to influence college football's direction. Feinbaum's commentary cannot erase these realities. Newton, Sanders, Winston, Jackson, and others have already secured their places in football history. By publicly confronting misinformation, Newton set a precedent for athletes who now possess the platforms and technology to present their stories unfiltered. The microphone no longer belongs exclusively to legacy broadcasters. Newton holds it now, and he intends to keep it. A decisive shift that reduces the gatekeeper's influence and ensures that accomplishments are judged on merit rather than narrative manipulation. Rich Eisen addressed the armchair analysts and online critics head on. Shedeur Sanders just received his opportunity, and the backlash arrived immediately. Eisen responded with a clear, point-by-point case explaining why the criticism misses the mark. If you thought Shedeur's rise was rapid, Eisen's analysis puts it in proper context. Here's what he laid out on air.
Already speaking in Cleveland high schools.
Weekend after, flying out immediately to get to work.
But his character's terrible, right? You know, and listen, oh, he interviewed bad, you know. According to who? The New York Giants? No offense, Bert. The same New York Giants that gave Daniel Jones a huge contract and let Saquon Barkley out the door, that's the intel we're trusting here?
That was for him to celebrate. He just made, I mean, look, he put in work in college. He had the privilege of being coached by his father,
which we all would love and do.
Turned around not one, but two programs in college football. And then literally for any athlete, being drafted at the highest level is a success story in itself.
Rich Eisen delivered a direct response to the critics. He addressed the online claims reducing Shedeur Sanders to Deion Sanders' son instead of evaluating him as a quarterback on merit. Eisen challenged those assumptions and refocused the discussion on performance, preparation, and opportunity.
Say Kenny Pickett had strained his hamstring. Shedeur, they say his first day in pass, 9 for 9, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. Really was just hating on this young guy.
Within minutes, Rich Eisen delivered a structured breakdown, addressing each claim with evidence and dismantling weak narratives through clear analysis. He replaced speculation with data and kept the focus on what matters: decision-making, accuracy, leadership, preparation, and game management. The reality is simple. Shedeur Sanders was not given this opportunity. He earned it through performance and consistency against real competition. He accepted the role, met the standard, and handled the moment with professionalism and urgency. No shortcuts, no favors, just results and readiness. Eisen's point was direct. Evaluate Shedeur on his work, not assumptions, and acknowledge that he has justified the opportunity on the field.
I've done it at 2 locations already, so it's simple. So that's why when people say I'm not, you know, one of the top quarterbacks or the top quarterback, is what are y'all going based off of? Because I did it year after year after year, and you see the progression. So it's like, obviously, it got to be some type of external hate that you have for the family, for the last name, for anything, because I know I proved myself.
While many were still debating whether he was NFL ready, Shedeur Sanders stepped onto the practice field and operated like a clear QB1, setting protections, controlling tempo, and executing the plan. The narrative that he is just flash, media attention, or his father's influence does not hold up against his work in installs, progressions, and situational drills. What he showed was composure, efficiency, and command of the offense. He processed quickly, protected the football, and delivered on-time throws, demonstrating preparation and control.
I'm a firm believer. If I wanted Shedeur Sanders at 2, at worst at 33, of course I already think that he's better than other quarterbacks, because that's the type of talent. That's where I would have picked him at. And if he was at 2 or 33, and he still had the same exact skill set, we would be talking about him starting and playing.
Right. Well, there'd only be 3 quarterbacks.
It'd be 3 quarterbacks, not 4.
Yeah.
But since he moved to the 5th round, that's cool. They might have to go along with it. But to me, I think if you ask who got the best tools, I'm going with Shedeur Sanders.
From the first day of camp, he was not there to get by. He arrived to lead. There was no hesitation in installs, no lapses in fundamentals, just precise timing, clean footwork, and consistent velocity to every level of the field. He managed protections, controlled cadence, and delivered in situational work, showing command rather than learning on the fly. The approach was efficient and disciplined, with attention to detail and progressions and ball placement that reflected preparation, not improvisation. At the same time, Rich Eisen addressed the narrative directly and backed it with evidence. He laid out clips, context, and performance markers to cut through speculation. Eisen emphasized that Shedeur Sanders did not step into this moment because of publicity. He built toward it through sustained work, resilience, and results. The background, media readiness, high football IQ, and a professional approach was developed over years, not days, and it translated to immediate operational control of the offense. The resistance came from familiar places. Some in the traditional guard still frame mobile quarterbacks as limited and expected the nepotism label to define him. That view did not hold up against what was on the field. Composure under pressure, secure decision-making, accurate throws into tight windows, and consistent execution in red zone and 2-minute sequences. Eisen's point was clear. Evaluate Shedeur Sanders on performance and readiness. The evidence shows he earned the opportunity and is meeting the standard with accountability and consistency.
Yeah, teams didn't draft him because they didn't think he was first-round talent. And the quote we played and that's on the screen, I think is flatly wrong. We all know this shouldn't have happened. Yes, it should have. It should have happened because this wasn't. Now, again, teams can be wrong. The league as a whole can be wrong. Hell, the Baltimore Ravens drafted a 25-year-old tight end before they drafted Lamar Jackson in the same draft. The die is not cast on who Shedeur Sanders.
He stated it plainly. This is not a celebrity appearance. This is a quarterback with pocket presence, leadership, and decision-making that stands on its own. You either show it or you settle into a backup role. Shedeur Sanders is not auditioning. He is establishing himself as the starter. When the opportunity arrived, whether through injury, trade, or depth chart changes, Shedeur was prepared and delivered. He did not hesitate. He executed the offense and finished drives. As others tried to catch up to what they were seeing, Rich Eisen reinforced the same message he has been repeating. Evaluate the work. Camp reports have been consistently positive, but the important shift is how the performance is being received. Casual attendees who came to observe left talking about Shedeur's command and poise. Detailed observers focused on his pre-snap reads, protection checks, and audibles, highlighting the mechanics, timing, and ball placement that support efficient, controlled play.
Honestly, guys notice it more when you're out winning games, right? If Cleveland starts off in a bad start, they're not doing well, and all of a sudden Shedeur or Dillon Gabriel are doing well in 7-on-7. They're throwing dimes. In practice drills, the number one defense can't stop them. People take notice of that, and the more that the players see it, they're gonna. Then the comments start happening over the lunch table. They start happening throughout the building, and that's when the pressure really will get severe.
The Cleveland Browns were focused on resolving their quarterback situation until Jason Kelce made pointed comments that triggered a strong reaction from ownership. The response inside the organization was immediate and intense. What exactly did Kelce say that has the dog pound on edge and the front office under pressure?
We've seen that miserable game by the Cleveland Browns. So they throw Joe Flacco in there, and I like Joe Flacco. He did good, but they gave him the resource of all the first-team guys. Then they throw Dillon Gabriel in there with first teams and second teams. So Dillon always is getting protected. The same thing again, they gave this scrub max protection on every play. Yeah, he completed some passes, but let's talk about his mistakes. He's still inconsistent with his throws, but he at least had max protection.
The Cleveland Browns continue to be defined by inconsistency and avoidable setbacks. Even as fans hoped the organization had turned a corner, Jason Kelce, fresh off retirement, offered a direct critique that reignited doubts about the team's direction. His remarks implied the franchise's structure and decision-making remain unstable and recent progress may not hold. The takeaway for leadership is straightforward. Identify core issues, align on a coherent plan, and execute with discipline. For supporters, it's another sign that the problems run deeper than a single season.
They throw Shedeur Sanders in there with the lowest cab drivers you couldn't even get on 5th Street. And I'm pissed off, bro, because the play calling was abysmal. Look, even if you don't like Shedeur didn't even get a chance to be trash. even if you think Shedeur is garbage, he didn't even get a chance to be garbage. That's how awful the offensive line was. Kevin Stefanski still doesn't want to give Shedeur second strings and first strings reps. Why is that?
Browns ownership's response shifted from measured to urgent. The pattern is familiar in Cleveland. The team once treated Johnny Manziel as a franchise solution, retained Hugh Jackson for a second year despite results, and invested heavily in Deshaun Watson through a costly trade and contract. These decisions reflect aggressive but poorly aligned planning. The outcome has been continued instability instead of sustained progress.
That this was the guy that they wanted to start. He's seasoned, he's experienced, he still has a big-time arm, even at his age, and they open with the Cincinnati Bengals. They wanted that experienced guy. He was always going to be the guy. They were not going to start Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders in week 1. Kenny Pickett had a hamstring injury. It makes it easy to go with Joe Flacco. And the question isn't and wasn't going to be who's the starter in Cleveland. The question is, who's going to be the backup in Cleveland? Who's going to be the number 2 quarterback when they open the season against these Bengals?
Fans still show up season after season, expecting improvement and bracing for setbacks. The usual pattern has been early optimism followed by a gradual collapse. But last season was different. For a sustained stretch, the Browns looked organized and competitive, resembling a functioning team.
Couple days, 3 days until roster cutdowns, how do you feel about that? Do you feel like you belong here on this team?
Obviously, I think overall as a player, I feel like I put in the work. I feel like everything I do, I try to do it to my best, and that's all I ask for. So I feel like everybody feels like, they should be on the team, and if you ask anybody on the team, would they feel like they belong, in their own eyes. So I feel like I do, but I'm my own player, I think about myself in a high regard.
The front office entered the offseason confident. Kevin Stefanski was being praised, and the Dog Pound believed the team had made real progress. Then Jason Kelce delivered a pointed assessment that cut through the optimism. Fresh into retirement, the former Eagles All-Pro and Super Bowl champion said Cleveland still looks like a team patching over issues rather than building a durable contender. Kelce's view was direct. The Browns' structure is fragile, and the roster is too dependent on perfect health at quarterback. He argued the team is one injury away from losing continuity and sliding backward. Because Kelce has operated inside a stable, championship-level organization, his comments carried weight with players, media, and fans. The reaction was immediate. People took his critique seriously, not as outside noise, but as an informed evaluation of how a successful team should be built. Ownership also felt the impact. Jimmy Haslam's response shifted to urgency, a sign that leadership recognizes the stakes. The criticism arrives in the context of prior high-risk decisions, especially the fully guaranteed $230 million commitment tied to Deshaun Watson. Watson has missed time and shown inconsistency when available, and the contract has constrained flexibility. Kelce's remarks highlight why depth, alignment between the front office and coaching staff, and a clear contingency plan at quarterback are non-negotiable. The takeaway is straightforward. Cleveland must convert last season's progress into a stable framework, protect the quarterback, deepen critical positions, and establish a plan that survives injuries and short-term setbacks. Without that, the games that fueled optimism will remain temporary.
If you're a betting man, who do you think starts for the Browns at quarterback?
Okay, this is the situation. Kenny Pickett, they actually traded for him. Joe Flacco, no one's bringing Joe Flacco in the building thinking Joe Flacco's going to be the starter. If Joe Flacco is your starter,
you got a problem.
You have a huge problem. And if they were saying Shedeur was the starter as the 5th rounder, you got a real problem too, because he passed over all these guys in these reps in the offseason in shorts, in bikini shorts, Speedos and stuff. Like, no. That kind of stuff. So I'm not that surprised when you put down a 3rd round pick on a quarterback. You do believe he has a certain skill set.
Jason Kelce stated the obvious. Cleveland committed to a quarterback who hasn't played at an elite level in years, and Joe Flacco's playoff run didn't change the long-term outlook. Ownership appeared more upset that the criticism was public than by the substance of the critique. Many fans agreed. They've seen this pattern before. Rosters age, injuries are inevitable, and when a single contract dominates the cap, one setback at quarterback can undermine the entire season. Kelsey's broader point was about structure. The Browns prioritized the high-cost, uncertain starter over depth and contingency. The late-season surge masked issues that remain: limited cap flexibility, thin depth at key positions, and an offense that lacks a credible plan B. Fans recognize how quickly a strong defense can decline with injuries, and how an offense without redundancy stalls. The AFC North raises the stakes. Baltimore with Lamar Jackson sustains a top standard. Cincinnati with Joe Burrow returns to contention when healthy. Pittsburgh rarely slips below .500 under Mike Tomlin and wins with defense and consistency. In that environment, Cleveland can't rely on perfect health or peak form from one player. The path forward is clear. Diversify cap allocation, reinforce the offensive line and receiver depth, carry a legitimate backup plan at quarterback, and install a scheme that functions regardless of who is under center.
Given what we saw yesterday with Shedeur Sanders, somebody on the Cleveland Browns is 100% getting fired, probably by the end of this year. The person who's probably going to end up getting fired is Kevin Stefanski, because I know that he didn't want Shedeur Sanders on the team. It was Andrew Berry who made that pick. You can't really go against your GM. Bad things happen in this situation. But Shedeur Sanders is not without fault for what we saw yesterday. This is the play that we saw yesterday that had the internet just exploding, where Shedeur Sanders took like a 24-yard sack. Half of the internet is saying that this is all Kevin Stefanski's fault.
Cleveland showed progress last season, but the underlying concerns remain. Jason Kelce highlighted them directly. The Browns' long-term plan is fragile, cap-constrained, and overly dependent on perfect health at quarterback. His comments focused attention on structural issues, roster depth, continuity in coaching, and a sustainable offensive approach, rather than a single hot streak. That criticism resonated because it reflected what many around the league already see. Ownership's reaction underscored the sensitivity. Jimmy Haslam has presided over frequent coaching and quarterback changes, and external scrutiny carries weight when it comes from a respected veteran with championship experience. Kelce's remarks reinforce that last year's Joe Flacco stretch was a short-term solution, not a foundation. The team still needs a durable plan that can withstand injuries and inconsistency. The practical takeaway is clear: stabilize the system, diversify cap usage, and build depth at key positions so the offense functions regardless of who is under center. That includes a coherent development pathway for younger talent such as Shedeur Sanders, with defined practice reps, protection, and scheme alignment. Kelce didn't say anything outrageous. He articulated the gap between a brief surge and a credible long-term contender.
I have the faith of a mustard seed. Right, because this is the greatest resurrection since Jesus the Christ. Right, like at some point, Joe Flacco was thinking about getting into TV.
Yeah.
Right, Joe Flacco didn't have a job, and then now you not only come back and start for the Cleveland Browns late in the 2023 season, but they came back around to you, and you're now the day one starter for a franchise that just 2 years ago was in the playoffs.
The Browns' quarterback situation remains unsettled. Deshaun Watson was expected to be the long-term answer, but injuries and inconsistent play have prevented him from reaching an elite level. When the team turned to Joe Flacco after Watson's season deteriorated, Flacco immediately lifted the offense and produced results that highlighted the gap between expectations and reality. That a 39-year-old late addition could outperform a $230 million starter was not just a short-term surprise, it raised fundamental questions about roster construction and evaluation. Quarterback depth has been fragile, and the late-season surge masked broader structural problems. Jason Kelce's remarks made that clear. Cleveland is vulnerable if the starter is unavailable, cap flexibility is limited, and the offensive plan lacks a stable contingency. His critique drew attention to leadership and planning as much as on-field performance. Jimmy Haslam's strong reaction reflects the pressure on ownership. The organization has promoted a message of stability and progress, but Kelce's assessment suggested those gains are not yet durable. The path forward requires a realistic approach to the cap, a credible backup plan at quarterback, and a system that holds up regardless of personnel.